Hello farmers, I'm back again with another episode and would like to discuss a very important and alarming issue which is currently at stake. As you all are aware, or maybe some of you are not aware, Africa is at high risk from H5 virus, which is highly pathogenic avian influenza causing virus. So H5 is actually a virus which causes avian influenza, which is acronymed as HPAI, which simply means highly pathogenic avian influenza. So we shall discuss shortly about this disease, because this disease detected and diagnosed and already European countries and some countries in the Middle East and the Russian Federation, they are at risk of this disease. And since it's a viral disease, we have no cure to it, so we need to pay detailed attention to this. As Africa at large, we are suspecting that this disease might come at any given time. So moreover, it is likely that maybe the virus has already arrived in some parts of North and West Africa, but maybe remained undetected. We never know. But here are some important tips that I can share with you that might also help in during our production cycle. So what is avian influenza? It is avian influenza is caused by influenza virus. So a disclaimer, not to be confused with our seasonal human influenza. So it's caused by a virus which is called influenza. So avian influenza can affect food producing birds, which are your chickens, your turkeys, your quails, your broilers, your layers, and even wild birds. So this virus can generally be classified into two categories. The low pathogenic, which is low PAI, which is low pathogenic avian influenza, that typically causes little or no clinical signs in the birds. And we have the highly pathogenic avian influenza that can cause a severe clinical signs and or high mortalities in birds. So this is basically your avian influenza. It is an influenza virus which can cause deaths or high mortalities in our chickens. How this disease can be transmitted? This is our second question, maybe that we will need to answer in this video. This virus is mainly transmitted by wild birds, and these wild birds they normally don't show any signs, and they normally don't even affected by this virus. So as you can see, wild birds normally can carry avian influenza in their respiratory and intestinal tracts, and usually do not get sick, right? Avian influenza virus can be spread also through direct contact with secretions from infected birds, especially feces, or through contaminated water, equipment, and even clothing. Apart from being highly contagious among poultry, avian influenza virus readily transmitted from farm to farm, maybe by the movement of domestic live birds, people, especially when shoes and other clothing are contaminated, and contaminated vehicles, equipment, feed, cages, etc. So you can also see that this highly pathogenic virus can survive for a long periods of time in the environment, especially when temperatures are very, very low. As you can see, so it means we are in the rain season, it means we are at high risk of having this virus even here in Africa, because it's already rain season. And water can also maybe transmit this disease, and we've got the migratory wild birds that always migrate seasonally, and we assume that maybe in Africa they will always migrate during this rain season. We might also likely to get some migratory birds here in Africa, and those are normally the carriers for this avian influenza virus. We also need to note that this disease is a notifiable disease. It needs to be communicated to the Department of Veterinary Services or the police, nearest police station, once we immediately detect it. So we need to pay detailed attention to the signs or the clinical signs and symptoms of this disease. So what are the clinical signs and symptoms of avian influenza virus? So in the mild form, signs of illness may be expressed only as ruffled feathers, reduced egg production, or mild effects on the respiratory system. That is an unusual sound in the respiratory system of our birds. In the severe form of the disease, the virus may not only affect the respiratory tract, we need to pay detailed attention to this, but also invades multiple organs and tissues that results in massive internal hemorrhages, that is bleeding of internal organs, right? So it means it doesn't affect the respirator only, but it invades multiple organs in our birds. That can result in blood hemorrhages, that is in hemorrhage, which simply means the bleeding of the internal organs. Some of the following clinical signs can be seen once the birds are infected with this viral. One, quietness and extreme depression. So our birds will be very docile and they'll be depressed extremely. Sudden drop, that is if our layers are in production, sudden drop in egg production, many of which are, and some of the eggs may be soft shelled or even less shelled. The shell will be very, very soft, and in some cases the eggs may be even broken down in the ovary system of our birds, and sometimes they just die with the egg in the stomach, so to say, in another layman's language. So also the wattles and the combs, that is the comb in Shona we call it mchuchururu, becomes swollen and congested. So in some cases it becomes very, very swollen and very, very reddish. Very, very reddish. The color becomes very or extremely red. Also, swelling of the skin under the eyes. So the skin under the eyes will become very, very swollen. So swollen around and under the eyes. Also, coughing and sneezing, as I've been said earlier on, it also affects the respiratory tract of our birds. So it means the coughing and sneezing is unavoidable in this case. Hemorrhage on the hook. Also, sometimes we see the bleeding on the mouth parts. Sometimes we may see the bleeding. A few deaths may occur over several days, followed by a rapid spread and mortality rate that can approach 100% within 48 hours. So what it simply means, within 2 days of infection, sometimes our mortality will become 100%. It means this virus can have the potential to wipe away all our flock within 2 days of infection. So it's it's highly contagious. We need to pay detailed attention to this, and we need to practice the following biosecurity measures. So last but not least, let's discuss the measures or the preventative measures that we can talk or that I can recommend as your technical officer, or that can be recommended by any other technical officer in the poultry industry, that can also save our poultry from this highly contagious virus or highly contagious disease. First, let's have our foot bath in all entrance inserted or with very good disinfectant. The disinfectant that we have currently in the market, we've got Paragon, we've got ViraQ, we've got Biofarm, a lot, you can name it. Others I understand you are already using some of the disinfectant. We need to make sure that our foot bath and our wheel bath have correct disinfectant. Secondly, let's practice strictly biosecurity measures, right? Let's ensure that wild birds, sparrows, etc. cannot enter the chicken house to feed. Sometimes you see wild birds and sometimes you see just the birds in the poultry house. It is not recommended, especially in this time that we are currently in, where we are trying to combat the coming in of this virus from the European countries to Africa. Let's also make sure that no visitors on your farm, and let's try to avoid visiting our poultry farms. If we are to have visitors, let those visitors remain in the offices, not in the poultry section. So let's try by all means to avoid visitors in our poultry section. Let's also make sure that we maintain sanitization of property, poultry house and equipment, so that we need to make sure that our poultry section, our houses, our equipment are always disinfected regularly, time and again. It's also good maybe to fumigate with the proper disinfectant that can combat the viruses like our ViraQ. Time and again in the poultry section is always recommended, and it's good to practice that. Let's also avoid the introduction of birds of unknown disease status into your flock. You know, in some cases we always borrow each other, like the dual purpose keepers, like your Bosch, like your road runners. In some cases, our farmers always borrow each other, or sometimes they want just to test another breed, etc. Let's avoid borrowing, or let's avoid introducing the birds. If you are to do it, let's quarantine that bird for some time to see if it manifests any signs of disease before we introduce it to our flock, right? Let's closely monitor our flock for any signs, and if we detect unusual signs that we don't even understand, let's report that quickly to the Department of Veterinary Services. Let's also keep poultry away from areas that frequently or that frequented by wild fowl. So let's try by all means to avoid wild fowl in our poultry, and let's try to keep away our poultry from those. Now, if the disease is detected, it's not always good to see a disease then you try to move around with it, right? It's always good to report that disease and cow your farm. You need to call it, and probably with your workers, and you also yourself, you need to quarantine yourself and quarantine your workers and quarantine every one of you, so that you don't visit other farms, etc. And your farm becomes a red zone for that moment. So let's pay detailed attention, especially the biosecurity measure is only way to go at this moment. Let's make sure that our poultry section is well fenced, and it's fenced properly. I think the detailed attention, the detailed presentation that I've made will also help one in during the production, and will also help us as Africa, and also help us as individual to combat this virus before it affect our poultry in Africa and in Zimbabwe in particular. I thank you.